Hello and welcome to the Journeymen podcast. I'm Joseph Corlett.
I'm Mark Reeves.
Join us as we travel from club to club, delving into the stories, tales and myths that help define the ethos and identities of football clubs all around the world.
We'll look at club history from all angles, whether it be a team's tactical style, superstitious fan rituals, or discussing the best players to grace the shirt.
From our base in Berlin, we aspire to give clubs of all sizes a platform to discuss their greatest triumphs and toughest heartbreaks.
We'll take you through fascinating untold stories with tales of heroes, villains, promotions, relegations, and everything in between. And we are back.
Back for part 2 of episode 7, diving into Venezia Football Club, that team from the Lagoon.
Unfortunately, it was an unplanned, a longer period away than what we'd have liked.
I'll hold my hands up and say that it was mainly my fault. Life got in the way, moving flat, getting ill, running a 10k, very busy. So I'm sorry to all those fellow journeymen out there, men and women, but we are back. We are back in the Lagoon. We are back with the Winged Lions, and we're excited to get into this. We had some lovely reactions, some lovely feedback about part 1, and this shout out Hertha Inters. Here we are, part 2, back just for you. So if this is the first time you've listened to us, part 2 of Venezia, we've got our first part out where we discovered the club's early beginnings. We talked about their finest hour where they won the Coppa Italia, and also dived into one of the most heartbreaking moments for Italian football. However, that's just a little teaser of part 1. We're going to dive into part 2 now, get straight into it as we've been away for far too long. Let's get into it.
So we left Venezia in part 1 when they sort of weren't in a great spot, and they spent much of the 80s languishing in the lower divisions of Italy. So we're going to join back up with the club on the eve of the 1986-87 season, where something very big in the club's history.
We alluded to it in part 1, but this is where Venezia get their now famous club colours, as they merged with a mainland team called Mestre. Ahead of the 86-87 season, Venezia would be acquired by businessman Maurizio Zamparini, and he would lead the club over the next 16 seasons.
Yeah, so the merger would take place in June 87, and Zamparini temporarily changed the name of the club to Calcio Venezia Mestre, though the club would be renamed Associazione Calcio Venezia in November of 1989. With the merger, as Joey just alluded to, the club's colours would change from Nero-Verde, green and black, to Arancioneroverde, orange, black, green, the colourway that we so much adore today, and that is so iconic on the club's kits. Furthermore, the team's matches were actually moved from the Penzo to the Stadio Francesco Baracca in Mestre, so some big changes to the club here.
I can imagine here that he's not really keeping either fans happy, because on one hand he's cutting out Mestre, the name of the club, as it loses Calcio Venezia Mestre and then it just becomes AC Venezia, but then also moving Venezia out of their original home ground out towards the mainland. So I don't think he's keeping either team happy here.
He'll definitely make people even more unhappy with his next move, because he then changes the name of the club to Venezia in 1907, thus excluding any reference to Mestre altogether. So like you said, I think everybody's getting pissed off. To further annoy the Mestre fans, the club actually move out of the Stadio Francesco Baracca in 1991. So, slowly their club has been completely eroded.
So as the original fans of Mestre began to see their club being erased from history, attempts were made to bring back this original Mestre club. They made a collaboration with a fellow lower league team around Venice, and then changed the name of that team back to Mestre Calcio, and started once again in the lowest tiers of Italian football.
This latest iteration of Mestre is the one that carries now quite a bit of hatred for Venezia after basically seeing their club deleted from the history books. And in the present day, they actually sit in Serie D. They reached Serie C in 2017, but money troubles since then have seen them stuck around the 4th tier and below. As an English fan point of view, I think the closest we sort of have to this scenario is sort of like the Wimbledon MK Dons scenario a little bit. By the 87-88 season, Venezia achieved promotion from Serie C2 to Serie C1, and returning to the 3rd tier for the first time since the 76-77 season. So you realise they've had a long time, over 10 years out of playing in these sort of lower levels. And over the next 2 seasons, the team featuring players including Giancarlo Filippini and a young Paolo Poggi, who we'll speak about quite a bit through the rest of the episode, steadily improved and built towards a return to Serie B.
As we mentioned there, Paolo Poggi, he was a born and bred Venetian who would play for the club across 3 different spells. He would go on to play for the likes of Udinese, Roma and Parma, amongst others. During the 01-02 season, Poggi scored the fastest goal in Serie A history, scoring against Fiorentina with Piacenza in the opening 8 seconds of the match. This record was only broken later in 2020 by Rafael Leao, scoring after 6 seconds. Paolo Poggi is in fact Venezia's 6th highest appearance maker of all time, as well as being their 6th highest goal scorer of all time too.
So like we said, the club has started to build this stability and looking towards a return to get back to the second level, to get to Serie B. And by 1990, Venezia would be managed by Alberto Zaccaroni, and he would lead the club back to the second tier after 23 years away. You can see now, like as we always see when we do these episodes, you have these ebbs and flows of clubs. If you go down to the basement, you have time at the bottom, and you start building back up. And this seems to be one of those now where they're riding a bit of a wave.
They won the playoff, beating Como 2-1 with 7,000 fans travelling to Cienza's Stadio Dino Manzuri, which is about a 2.5-hour journey from Venice and even further for the Como fans. An added bonus of their promotion saw Venezia return back to the Pierluigi Penzo, as the Stadio Francesco Baracca in Mestre was not fit for the second tier. This would also lead to further renovations and expansions of the Penzo, as the running track will be removed and therefore the stands move closer to the pitch. Much better for those fans travelling to the Penzo.
Once again, they entered this period of consolidation and just becoming a steady Serie B team, and they would be in Serie B for the next 7 seasons. And probably the most exciting moment of this era, especially when you look back and look what he achieved afterwards, would be in the 94-95 season when a young Christian Vieri joined the club for 1 season in Serie B, scoring 11 goals in 29 appearances before leaving to Atalanta and Juventus and the rest after that. But that's got to be quite a highlight looking back, definitely.
One of the biggest names to pass through the Penzo, you've got to believe. Venezia would continue to build upon this period of stability and would actually gain promotion back to Serie A in the 97-98 campaign. Under manager Walter Novellino, they would finally earn promotion after a 31-year absence from the top tier.
And this is on a completely unrelated note. I just wanted to mention his current club drama situation that's going on. I think is just fascinating. So just a quick thing. So in July 2021, he was hired by Juve Stabia in Serie C to become their new manager, only to be sacked on the 17th of October 21 following a bad start to the season. Okay. February 2022, he was reinstated as manager following the dismissal of his replacement, who took over after he left, and then he leaves at the end of the 21-22 season. Fast forward March 2023, he returns again to Juve Stabia, accepted to become their 3rd manager of the season. So this club sounds completely mental of what I've heard, and he just keeps getting fired and coming back, and it seems like he just loves being punished, I think.
Kind of sounds like Italian football distilled down into its purest form of just constantly firing and rehiring managers.
But at least Watford are trying to cover the world's population as they do it, whereas they're just happy with this one guy. They just keep firing him and bring him back again. Walter
Novellino's agent must be just cashing in those checks every time he goes back. He's like, oh, they're back on the phone. There's another sign-on bonus for me.
I think when it gets to this point, there's no point even firing him, bring him back. They should just keep him on retainer. And I think this is the career that Frank Lampard's probably going to forge out for himself, as he just comes back every time Chelsea fire a manager. He could be the Walter Novellino of Chelsea.
But back to the promotion campaign, it would be clinched at home against Fidelis Andrina in the June of 1998, as the Lagoon club finished 2nd in the table behind Salernitana, also friends of the club nowadays.
And they were also returning to Serie A after a long absence of 50 years. So pretty historic to see these clubs coming back up to Serie A. Stefan Schwock's 17 goals powered Venezia to promotion, and he'd actually been signed in the summer from Novellino's previous club, Ravenna, after scoring 21 goals in 33 games for them in the Serie C1. So Novellino's had a real impact on this team, not only how he's got them playing, but the signings he's made as well. And this promotion would actually be the first of 4 to the top division that Novellino would obtain in the following 5-year period. So this guy, just at this period anyway, just loved Serie B. Constant promotions, immediately get up, get fired or leave, and just get someone promoted again.
Mark's put in brackets here, the Italian Warnock/Bruce.
I'm pretty sure Warnock and Bruce have the most championship promotions, I think, and this guy clearly was an absolute animal at this point of just getting close promoted.
Venezia in Serie A e la città festeggia nel suo cuore storico, Piazza San Marco. La lunga notte di festa è cominciata qui per giocatori, dirigenti, tifosi, ore di entusiasmo. Poco prima allo stadio si era consumato l'ultimo atto necessario per la promozione, la sfida con la Fidelis Andria, in un pomeriggio oppresso dall'AFA.
So they finally returned back to the promised land, the top tier of Italian football for the 98-99 season, and they would go about that in a good way, with sporting director Beppe Marotta strengthening the team, signing the striker Filippo Maniero and Massimio Taibi from AC Milan.
Through the first half of the season, Venezia were bottom of the table and Maniero hadn't scored a goal. And in January, the turning point comes when the arrival of a player I'm sure we'll all fondly look back on, and definitely someone that Venezia fans fondly look back on. It's the arrival of young playmaker Alvaro Recoba on loan from Inter Milan. I mean, even just saying Alvaro Recoba is making me happy already.
Maniero and Recoba would form a prolific partnership, sensationally turning Venezia's season around, combining for 23 goals. Maniero with 12 and Recoba with 11, as they gradually pulled Venezia out of the relegation zone.
In the penultimate week of the season, Venezia needed a win against Inter to preserve their Serie A status, and Recoba notched a goal and an assist in a 3-1 win against his parent club there, as Venezia completed their great escape. The Serie A title this season would be won by AC Milan, who coincidentally were being managed by Venezia's 1990 Serie C promotion winning manager Alberto Zaccheroni, so a nice little way to round up the story there. But yeah, Recoba coming in on loan and absolutely smashing it. Yes.
Zamparini e Novellino, i volti felici della festa di Venezia, ma sulla gioia dei tifosi lagunari c'è un'ombra di tristezza. L'addio di Alvaro Recoba, l'uomo che ha radicalmente cambiato il corso della stagione dopo un inizio disastroso. E anche oggi l'uruguaiano è stato decisivo. Il gol lampo di Volpi, arrivato a meno di 20 secondi dal fischio d'inizio su perfetta imbeccata proprio di Recoba, ha aperto la strada al successo sull'Inter. E Recoba con questa splendida punizione ha di fatto chiuso la partita. Sono trascorsi meno di 4 minuti e l'Inter, passato e futuro del cino-uruguaiano, è battuto.
The Uruguayan coming in and doing bits for the Lagoon club.
Definitely, but as the old saying goes, never fall in love with a lone player. And sadly, like you said, that's what happened. And he would return back to Inter, so they stay in the league. But obviously the saddest thing is Recoba would be gone, so it's going to be a season without Recoba.
So as we move into the new millennium, it's a new Serie A season beckons, and Venezia would actually replace Novellino with a new manager. But however, also losing Alvaro Recoba, they would also lose goalkeeper Taibi to Manchester United.
Which, of course, we probably don't need to say much about the incident. You probably just need to say Massimo Taibi, Matt Letitia, the blind Venetian, as he was known in some newspapers, is a howler that goes down in Premier League history. I'm sure you've seen it, but if not, YouTube it. Yeah, poor guy. It's a classic.
However, on a more positive note, there'll be a new manager in the dugout, and it would be a very big name nowadays as Luciano Spalletti. Obviously, man of the moment right now, as he's just guided Napoli to their third ever Scudetto title. But here, at this time, he was still developing as a manager.
Despite the many changes at the club, like we've just mentioned, Recoba going back off loan and players being sold and new manager coming in, Filippo Maniero did remain at the club, and he would finish as their top goal scorer again with 9 goals. And they would add to the players they had there. They would once again raid AC Milan and sign future Bolton, Birmingham and Leicester defender Bruno Ngotti, who had actually played 25 games the previous season as Milan clinched the title. So you're thinking, on paper, they're strengthening the squad, or at least trying to.
During the campaign, despite bringing in Luciano Spalletti, he wouldn't last, as they would go through 3 coaches in the season. Spalletti was sacked in the autumn, then recalled after Giuseppe Materazzi lasted just 27 days in the job, until Francesco Oddo was hired in February.
3 different managers, but Spalletti had 2 goes, so it's pretty crazy. Despite the struggling league form, Venezia would make a run in the 1990,000 Coppa Italia, eliminating Udinese and Fiorentina, among a few others, along their way to the semi-finals, where they were actually finally beaten by Lazio. But as you can imagine, by all those managerial changes, this form doesn't carry over to the league.
Ultimately, Venezia would finish in 16th place and be relegated back to Serie B. This is where we start to see the downward slide after the upward climb over the past few years.
And initially in the 2000-2001 Serie B season, they hired Cesar Prandelli and he would lead them straight back to Serie A. But like I said, this doesn't last. And Prandelli is let go early into the 01-02 season in Serie A. And Venezia would go on to finish dead last and suffer its second relegation in 3 years.
If you thought this couldn't get any worse, in the July of 2002, the then owner, Maurizio Zampari, left Venezia and took over the club Palermo. After taking over this new club, the following day he would pull a move that would be called the Furto di Pagine. Zampari would in fact get 12 players from Venezia's pre-season camp, take them on a bus, and pretty much just drive them to his brand new club in an act of, I don't know what you would call this, theft, kidnapping.
I think Mestre fans would call it karma, probably.
In this mass transfer, we talk about deadline deals. We talk about the lost art of the swap deal that never happens anymore. You love a double deal, don't you, Mark? Like 2 players from the same club moving to a new club. However, this is another level.
I would just love to see, like, in a modern day setting of, like, the Twitter announcement of, like, all 12 players, like, sat next to each other or something. But, like, 12 players and a manager all taken from a club because you've bought another club is completely mental.
Like, this puts Nottingham Forest to shame when you think of how many players they bought. Like, at least
they didn't buy them all from one club.
Yeah, exactly. Like, at least they spread it around a bit. They didn't completely destroy a club in one fell swoop. They just took loads of players from everywhere. But yeah, this is incredible. I couldn't really get over it when we discovered this story.
I genuinely hadn't heard of this before, and it completely blew my mind that your owner basically from one day to another leaves your club, takes over another club, but takes basically all of your playing staff, coaching staff, everything.
Even thinking of the logistics for the players. Like, how do they explain to their wives, we need to move from Venezia in the very north of the country all the way down to Palermo? Like, surely some wives and family wouldn't have been happy with just, we're moving. Like, Sorry, love. Yeah, the owner's taking me on a bus. He's kidnapped me and we're moving over 2,000 kilometres south to a practically new part of the country.
Also, most notably, of the 12 players that initially go, one of them is Felipe Maniero as well. They, out of like this dark period of relegation, is the guy who has consistently scored goals for them as well. So yeah, that's not a good sign. And I think, if anything, the next season, Venezia finishing 15th in the 02-03 Serie B season, I think they did pretty well to do that, considering they lost most of their team in like you say, one swoop.
Not to get a back-to-back relegation is spectacular to survive, to be honest.
And obviously, there's only so long you can sustain those kind of things. So then by the 03-04 season, they finished 20th, but survive a relegation playoff, defeating Bari 2-1 on aggregate. But yeah, the club's financial situation could not be saved. From that point onwards, the end of the 04-05 Serie B season, Venezia was relegated and declared bankrupt. The former owner, Zamperini, has got a lot to answer for there, I think.
So, as many clubs in the Italian leagues do, when they go bankrupt, their sporting licence falls back onto the mayor of the city to be refounded as a brand new club, as like a Phoenix club. And so, in the summer of 2005, the club would be refounded as Società Sportivo Calcio Venezia, also known as SSC Venezia, and was admitted back to Serie C2.
Yeah, and in the 05-06 Serie C2 season, they immediately end promotion to Serie C1 and would spend the next 3 seasons in the third tier, but the club would be declared bankrupt once again at the end of the 08-09 season. And I think when you're talking about true Italian club stat, when Italian clubs go bankrupt, they don't usually do it once, they do it about 3 or 4 times in a very short space of time, and Venezia are no stranger to that. And so in the summer of 2009, with Venice in danger of being a city without a football club at all, the mayor, Massimo Casorini, personally supervised the foundation of a new club. And in July 2009, the club was refounded as Football Club Unione Venezia. They're recognised as the legitimate successor of SSC Venezia and was admitted to Serie D. It must get pretty clouded when, 3 bankruptcies in the space of a few years?
Various forms of the name Football Club, Società Sportivo, Associazione Calcione, all wrapped around Venezia in some way as well, let alone Mestre are out there angry as well about their name not being part of the club anymore. It's a very complicated period for Venezia, unfortunately.
It's very complicated, especially you feel like you need a notepad and paper to try and work out all of the various different names. But Venezia, on the pitch, were keeping it simple and would win Serie D in the 11-12 season, and then promotion from the Liga Pro Second Divisione to the Liga Pro Prima Divisione in the 2012-13 season.
And just when you think they've finally got some stability as this FBC Unione Venezia, they last 2 seasons in the third tier, it's not particularly up or down, it's just pretty average. They finally finish in mid-table in 12th, but off the field, once again, things go sour. The finances went south, and this led to this new version of Venezia declaring bankruptcy for the 3rd time in 10 years. What a nightmare. This is absolutely ridiculous. What's happened? Where's all this money going? You'd think after the 2nd time, they might keep an eye on the books. We'll just try and keep money in the coffers But what is going on?
If you go back to the Zamparini point when he moved all the players out, sold the club, and that first bankruptcy, and then each time they're restarting in lower and lower divisions. So it's almost like, it's doomed for failure, really. So
trying to constantly attract players. To be fair, the players they were talking to were probably just getting confused about which form of Venezia. They're like, is this a new Venezia team? Is there now two in Venezia? They're like, no, it's the new one.
I imagine once you've signed your contract, it's already out of date because like the name has changed or something. So yeah, a very complicated point. But despite this sort of very low point in the history of Venezia, this is actually where almost the birth point of the modern Venezia that we know today.
So this is where the sun starts to shine in the lagoon once again, where a group of American investors led by American lawyer Joe Tacopina stepped in to acquire football club Unione Venezia and refounded them once again, thankfully, for the last time, and simply how we know them now as Venezia FC, which now just seems so clean and lovely after having to deal with SSC Venezia, FBC Unione Venezia, Venezia this, Venezia that. No, it's just Venezia FC now. Thank you.
Joe Tacopina actually made his name acting as a lawyer for very high-profile celebrities, and most recently Donald Trump, which is
We'll move away quickly from that. We don't want to talk about that. And he was previously involved in further American consortium that purchased AS Roma. Following that, he also purchased Bologna before then joining Venezia in a sort of complicated process. But galvanised by their newfound financial safety and new focus at the top of the club, the Winged Lions set upon a very successful campaign in Serie D.
Yeah, and within Serie D, they're in Group C with teams from the northeastern territories, including Venezia, Veneto, Trento, and South Tyrol, Sud Tyrol. So they would embark on a very successful season in Serie D within this Group C, playing 38 games, winning 27 of them, drawing 9 and only losing 2. And in the process, scoring 89, only conceding 26. So actually going up with a goal difference of 63 with 90 points. They're back with a vengeance, I say, and now climbing back up the ladder under this new American leadership.
So they finally climbed back into Serie C for the 2016-17 season, and a very big name would join the team in the dugout. It would be none other than Filippo Inzaghi.
He would lead them once again to another promotion, so from Serie C to Serie B, meaning so now once we get to the 17-18 season, this would be Venezia's first time in Serie B for 12 years, and they showed no fear, rising to become a surprise outsider for promotion. So you can see the racing through the divisions now.
Against all odds, they'd finish 5th in the league, landing in one of the playoff spots. In the first round, they would beat Perugia 3-0 at home in a one-leg tie, meaning then they would face Palermo, facing up against the team that stole all their players in the next round over 2 legs. The Venetians would draw 1-1 at the Penzo, but unfortunately lose 1-0 in Sicily, meaning they stayed in Serie B for another year.
And adding to that misery of the playoff defeat, Filippo Inzaghi would call quits on his time at the Penzo. The former AC Milan man would say he chose this project 2 seasons ago with the humility of dropping into the lower divisions, and in 5 minutes I realised I could work the way I wanted to. It's been 2 fantastic years. We'll each go our own way, but we did things that could never be cancelled out or forgotten, and we achieved remarkable results, and sometimes you have to end on a high. So he leaves at this point, and he'll be replaced by Stefano Vecchi, who would be brought to the dugout with some very big shoes to fill.
After Inzaghi's exit, the Winged Lions would prove to be a bit too difficult for the Bergamasque manager, as he would only last 7 games in the hot seat, with 1 win, 1 draw and 5 defeats. This set the tone for the 2018-19 season, as Venezia slid down the table, as firstly Walter Zenga, who would only last 19 games, and then lastly Serzi's Cosmi would last 13 games. This chaos saw Venezia finish 15th in the relegation playoff and lose to friends Salernitana, which would see Venezia relegated to Serie C, but at the death they would be spared thanks to none other than Palermo being punished with relegation due to, in brackets, administrative non-compliance. So maybe Venezia now are saying that's karma.
Yeah, so saved by a technicality, but you'd take it. I also love the official reasoning of administrative non-compliance, which it sounds very much like you didn't staple the paper in the right position or something, the way like it's written. But yeah, you're staying in the division, you definitely take that.
It's very fitting considering in part one we definitely talked about at least two examples of Venezia being saved from relegation due to like leagues changing or reformatting. So it's nice to have this now, even in the 21st century.
Despite this sort of big chunk of luck, the following season didn't start much better, and come February 2020, the club is in the middle of another relegation battle, and the ownership would change hands once again.
So in steps new American owners, as Joe Tacopina thankfully would leave, and Duncan Niederauer would buy 100% of the club's shares and form VFC Newco 2020 LLC as the parent company for Venezia FC. Duncan would look to build relationships with the local Venetian authorities, stating, "I and the group I represent are looking forward to further developing the strong partnership with Mayor Luigi Bugnaro in the interest of the club and the city of Venice." On the pitch, these new owners and Duncan said he won't be stepping on the toes of his footballing staff or data staff, stating, "I'm not going to call the manager saying this player should be playing. That's left to the technical staff. I have no grounding in these decisions, and if I did, it would be a very broken model." After so many owners coming and going from this club, to have someone who's just like, nope, I'm going to let the football guys do the footballing jobs.
Interesting, they go from Trump's lawyer to Duncan is the former CEO of the New York Stock Exchange and a banker with Goldman Sachs. But he did admit on the Athletic Football podcast that football is unlike any other business in the world and there's a lot more to learn. He's also spoken pretty strongly about the importance of financial stability, of course, amongst his own club, but also the entire Italian league system, and saying that basically he wants this whole ecosystem to be healthier. You can't sort of have 80 other clubs down the leagues below you that are constantly on the edge of bankruptcy. It's just not sustainable, and that's what we've spoken about, that you see a lot of the time with these big Italian clubs, and we've seen it even with likes of Parma and things like that, where once they do get into these financial troubles, it's just crazy. And so he's looking for the whole system to be healthier, which is a good view to have rather than just purely focusing on your own club.
He preaches about how a more stable structure with more wealth passed down the system, it's about making the entire ecosystem better, in his words.
But back on the pitch, just 1 month later into his ownership, the coronavirus pandemic would shut down the league until June, so not the most ideal start.
Despite all this talking, it must be one of the toughest things to do, where all of a sudden you can't implement anything that you've probably thought you could do, as obviously Italy was one of the most harshly hit by the coronavirus pandemic. And so, things like severe lockdowns were taking place all over the country. But when the season would finally resume, thankfully Venezia would actually go on an amazing run, just losing 2 of their final 10 matches, defeating Perugia on the final day of the season to remain in Serie B, saving themselves once again, finishing 11th in the league table, 5 points clear of the relegation playoff.
Very, very dramatic. They set about sort of building on this safety that they achieved in August 2020. They rebuilt all of their technical staff, bringing in some former long-time players and local Venetians, such as Matteo Colato as sporting director, and club legend we mentioned earlier, Paolo Poggi, as technical director, plus a young American, Alex Menta, as analytics director, and Vicenza-born Paolo Zanetti as manager. So taking it back to sort of local roots, having this connection to the fans, like bringing in a club legend like Paolo Poggi. Yeah, it must be great to get your fans on side, and especially at this point where people can't be in the stadium, but they can at least, almost got that connection to their team and to their players through these legends and people they know, like local people.
So as pandemic football started to roll into motion with the 2020-21 Serie B season, Venezia would actually take full advantage of these strange circumstances and finish 5th in the table, qualifying once again for the promotion playoffs to Serie A.
In the promotion playoff first round, Venezia defeated Chievo Verona thanks to an extra time goal from Dennis Johnson, winning the tie 3-2. The first leg of Venezia's semi-final match against Lecce was settled by a single goal from star striker Francesco Forte, who was particularly crucial to the club's promotion push with 15 goals in the season, and with a 1-1 tie in the away leg, enabling the club to advance to the final.
In the final, Venezia met AS Cittadella for a place in Serie A. A 1-0 away win at the opponent's Stadio Pier Cesare Tombolotto, and the following 1-1 result at home with a late equaliser from veteran forward Riccardo Boccolon secured Venezia their first season in Serie A for 19 years.
Fiordilino per Johnson che fa salire Malé a sinistra, Malé il cross, attenzione, il gol della Serie A, lo segna il Doge Boccolon, il Venezia trova il gol dell'1-1 e la promozione in Serie A. Il gol di Bocalon è travolto da tutti i compagni di squadra al 93esimo. Trova il gol della promozione Bocalon, entrato nel secondo tempo nel finale a un quarto d'ora dal termine al posto di Forte. È lui che realizza il gol che vale la promozione.
This achievement was marked as a rapid rise for the club from Serie D to Serie A in only 5 short years.
Amazing run through the divisions, and when you compare that to the chaos of not that long ago, the constant bankruptcies and starting up with a different name and all this, to then have this rapid rise, Serie D, Serie A, 5 years, bang, they're back to the top level.
Whilst also in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, doing
And the takeover.
City proud, to be honest, whilst none of them could go to the stadium. Despite having full lockdowns around Venice at the time, it was the biggest party in the city for years. Parades up and down the canal, full of boats. The new owner, Duncan Niederauer, was jumping in the lagoon with the players. It was one time where the ultras hadn't been allowed to show up. They hadn't been allowed to show their passionate support all season long, and now this was their time. It was their turn for a giant party. What a scene, as it was described.
Also love that Paolo Poggi, the club legend that's back, he spoke about how, you know, in these past 12 years the club had so many problems, big problems, and they lost almost an entire generation of supporters, and they very nearly had a city without a club, and they lost the soul of the club. But, you know, on this journey they've got it back. It wasn't easy, and they're still here, but it could have been a very, very different situation.
It was surreal. And if you watch that celebration on May 27th, that is a family celebrating a shared success. It is not a soccer team and an absentee owner walking down on the field pretending he's close to them. That is a family celebrating. It was a beautiful night. It was an amazing night for the city. The only mistake I made, upon further review, jumping into the canal was probably not the smartest thing I've ever done. But
how many showers did you take after that?
More than one. And but the players were right behind me. They came in right after me. One of our players jumped in after me just in case I needed help. But that's what family does. So it was fun. It was a fun night.
We get to this cool point now where the club has been on this amazing journey. They're suddenly back in Serie A after such a long time away. And this coincides with the point where everybody in the world starts hearing about Venezia again, or hearing about them even for the first time. And it's not just for this on-the-field antics. And I'm sure people who are listening to this second part know exactly where we're going to go with this. There's another reason why over the last couple of years people know who Venezia FC are.
This is where the new, brilliant designed Venezia Kappa shirts would go online and spark a massive viral campaign that would grow the brand of Venezia far further than pretty much any goal or any result on the pitch has probably ever done.
So now we're going to introduce a company, an agency called Fly Nowhere, but these guys are essentially the brains and architects behind what has gone so viral now, these iconic football shirts that have made Venezia so famous. But yeah, who are they? And they actually describe themselves as a nomadic house of art, culture and sport. They sort of keep their cards close to the chest, who is exactly part of this and who works for them. But one sort of standout figure that's come up in our research is a guy called Diego Moscasoni, who actually co-founded the group.
He stated in an interview, "We started as a football club called Nowhere FC, like a hypothetical football club, saying we can go anywhere, so we're kind of from nowhere at the same time." He also adds, Fly Nowhere became the commercial end of this project, and we started getting calls from companies to work on football projects with them. So they created a studio to do service consulting, design work, creative work, whatever these companies wanted to do in kind of like a footballing space to do with graphic design.
But Venezia wouldn't actually be their first Italian adventure. Like Joe said, they previously worked with other clubs, and they'd worked with Inter Milan and Roma designing sort of t-shirts, scarves, flags. But Venezia would be the first time where they actually work on a selection of football kits that will actually be used by the players on the pitch.
The agency has collaborated with the likes of fashion brand Supreme, the likes of Adidas, Umbro and EA Sports to boot. As they started to work with Venezia, they made a purposeful point to work with designs that be considered like high fashion pieces rather than just like another football shirt. Working with Venezia's chief brand officer Ted Filipacanos, and then even pulling in Diego Moscasoni on a permanent basis to become Venezia's creative director for a year.
Both of them actually already knew each other from before Venezia, crossing their paths in New York. So all these American links coming to the fore again.
Diego explained that they had actually been brought in to curate designs as early as 2016, but due to instability at the club under Joe Tacopina's ownership, they were never really used. In fact, parts were brought back for this 21-22 season. He goes on to explain his inspiration as he was studied in Venice as part of an exchange program in the late 90s, and he said he was already familiar with the city through the art and through the banale that surrounds the city. What sums up his inspiration wonderfully, he said, I was ready for it, prepared to jump into it. I just had a lot of appreciation for Venice, the 1,600 plus year old city, all of the weight that means to the likes of typography, to print making, to art, to glass blowing, to food, to just global trade. And you can kind of find various scraps of these design ideas, concepts, all over the internet and their social media if you're willing to dive back far enough.
The campaign imagery was highly stylized, the kind of thing you'd actually more likely see on fashion pages of a magazine rather than a football club's sort of Instagram feed. Somewhere like a cross between Mundial magazine and Vogue, this high-class treatment, this high-class fashion treatment for a football club and for football shirts and related clothing that hadn't really been seen before. And one of the designers, Matthew Chernikov, he described the result as Venezia embracing something really different. If you're just going to put the football shirt on a player and put them on a pitch, how many times have we all seen that before? But if you're actually going to put this beautiful Italian models with the luxury Italian products, a stylist from Milan putting this whole scene together, a photographer that usually only works for like fashion houses like Gucci or something, and this is why it became sort of the viral kit of 2021, not even the viral kit, the viral look of 2021.
And this is where they became to get the tagline of the most fashionable football club in the world. Many clubs have tried to collaborate, aiming their shirts at this kind of like fashion crowd, but Venezia are by far the biggest success story of this type of collaboration in world football.
And Fly Nowhere, their role within this, they also help to curate these photo shoots, the communication strategy. But in terms of the previous kit deals, which were with Nike, like when the Venezia got promoted, they didn't actually have a part to play within the designs of those previous shirts that were made by Nike.
This is where Fly Nowhere decided actively to move away from Nike's kind of more template designs and then join up with Italian brand Kappa, as they're both synonymous with Italian football, but smaller and therefore much more flexible in comparison to Nike. Kappa were also willing to take the risk of Fly Nowhere's designs that Nike simply weren't willing to do. Nike's proposed offering being a green and orange diagonal tiger-themed template that would actually, funny enough, end up becoming Birmingham City's third shirt instead. And also it was the same template and used with different colours for Benevento as well. So it's another kind of what could have been for Venezia's like famous designs if they hadn't chosen to push to Kappa and stayed with this kind of somewhat more basic design with Nike.
That exact scenario you just spoke about there sort of sums up perfectly why the move away from Nike to Kappa sort of happened, because if Nike put together this template and even if Venezia say no, and then it's chucked out as Birmingham City's third shirt, then you see that it's not a tailored product for you. It's just a template that they've changed some colours around with.
Diego Mascioni added some perspectives about ending that partnership with Nike. To be fair, saying, I think any disagreements in strategy with Nike are not based on anything like personal or even like local, mainly because Nike is geared for much bigger and much more template-based operations. So he's there saying it himself. They save the custom stuff for the biggest clubs. Unfortunately, like the likes of PSG, Inter Milan, they get that kind of service. And he adds, at the same time, Venezia is small, but it cannot be treated like a small city. It's tied with, or probably just behind Milan and Rome, as the most visited city in Italy.
President Duncan Niederauer also said about this decision that, in all honesty, they knew they were a small fish for Nike, and they thought that having a partner that was closer to home, easier to work with and collaborate with, who just understood we weren't a big fish, but we would be a good partner, makes sense, and clearly it did. And the result of this sort of hard work and change was a 4-shirt collection ready in time for the 21-22 season, but not quite as ready as you'd think it would be. You know, we've all seen this polished final product that went viral, these 4 shirts, but it was actually a bit of a rush to actually get them ready for Serie A, because the promotion was so last minute. All of these shirts had been designed for Serie B, and even though to us that doesn't really sound like, what does that change? It's, I don't know, the patches on the sleeve. But in reality, they have completely different licenses and regulations. They measure the centimetre of size of everything, different colours you're allowed to use, fonts and the numbers and things. So a lot had to be changed. And to sort of look at that, they managed to turn this whole thing around in about 60 days after these changes. Meanwhile, when they looked back, Nike's production cycle needed like 12 months.
So it was just not possible to be able to get this done in time with Nike, unfortunately. So that now legendary black home Kappa shirt with the gold trim would debut on the pitch in a friendly against FC Utrecht. Between its unveiling online and the first sighting in action, social media was already starting to buzz about this new design being one of the best in the world. This would in turn lead to coverage from around the world. Looking closer beyond the dizzying engagement metrics shown to you online, the kits weren't actually as loved close to home.
We sort of first did it because obviously this kit properly went viral, but yeah, you don't sort of necessarily think of the people who actually there and go to the games and go to the stadiums weren't the biggest fans. And as Duncan Niederauer actually explained why, he said that as much as the world loved the shirt, the local fan base didn't, and their explanation was very clear that the orange and green, like these very important colours, like we spoke about how they got them in their history, on the black home shirt they were sort of too hidden. It was more like a black shirt with these little details on, and they didn't like that, and they were quite vocal about not liking it and it not having the sort of spirit of the club within the shirt.
Diego adds to this, he said, they made banners the cover stood saying, "Fly nowhere, never again." A very small group of people online were hunting him down on social media, but that goes with the territory, he explains. He says, that's football, that's Italy. So he kind of takes it in good faith.
Despite sort of these comments about the fans didn't appreciate as much, it was coming from the right place, and these shirts had become a way sort of to express the city's colours, history and beauty, as well as the actual club itself. In terms of what they've got to work with, and Diego says, like, you've got to give a lot of credit to these colours, which have so much meaning and so much impact. Can you think of another team that play black, orange and green? Like, it just doesn't exist, and it's a very unique colourway and a unique look. These colours tell this story. They tell the story of the club, but not only that, they tell the story of Mestre, the mainline section against this former rival, the orange team, coming together and having this green and black theme. Like, it's just, yeah, it's a genius thing of bringing everything together.
As Ted Filipicanos states, when at that point there was a technical evolution, a generational change and a psychological shift, where this new generation has an entirely different relationship with football. You saw an exchange of ideas between football and fashion. It just felt like a moment where a small club could engage with more people than ever before, especially with stories that went way beyond the pitch, like with these Venezia shirts. He joined Venezia in 2015 when the club had its first American ownership.
To put all of sort of what we've just spoken about into context, that before the brand started to develop the ideas with Fly Nowhere and the Kappa collaboration, Venezia wouldn't even sort of sell Nike's basic minimum stock quantity. And that's how it's grown and how much this has changed.
I remember loosely before the Kappa designs exploded that it was kind of like Venezia's Nike designs were like a niche kind of, ooh, look at this cool club from Venice. But it was only within like football shirt Twitter. It was nowhere near the level of exposure they've got now, but it was starting to grow. But then this collaboration with Kappa has just taken it to far, far, far beyond another level.
The season they got promoted with Nike, like we said, the Fly Nowhere didn't design the shirts, but they did design the marketing campaigns around them. So even if you look back, like the imagery of these shirts and stuff is still very cool, but the product itself probably didn't carry it as much, and that's sort of everything has come together under Kappa. And I think what's quite cool, usually when we do these episodes, we have, we meet all these wonderful characters along the way and loads of crazy stories. And within this episode, yes, we've got these characters as people, but we also have like characters as shirts, which sounds quite strange, but they are key to this story in recent times with Venezia.
It's definitely the first time we've been doing research and I've been having to look into like art houses like around a football club's history. So Venezia undoubtedly are pioneers in this very specific kind of design and marketing kind of capability, where some clubs have built their myths on like long periods of sporting dominance. Fashionability has undeniably become like an alternative blueprint for success, for building a brand, for building a fan base.
And Duncan also says like they are lucky that our asset, our backdrop is Venice. It's a place everybody in the world knows. And he says it would be harder to create a buzz with a different city. And no disrespect to somewhere else, but if, I don't know, Chesterfield had employed the same people, I highly doubt it's going to have the same effect. Like Venice is the vehicle that's sort of driven this on and made it go crazy.
They put so much effort into showcasing the city that they were from. Details you might have missed, like the home shirt featuring realistic textures from the Venetian walls created using facades from around the lagoon. So like the stony texture you can see on the home shirt, that's from a building in Venice. For example, also the stars that were arranged in like the V shape down the front were replicated from those found in the Basilica San Marco. Like, so upon one of the churches dotted around the city, there's these little designs of stars, and they took that and used it on the shirt. So to make this beautiful piece, it's using that home inspiration. And at the end of the day, you cannot say that this redesign didn't work, as they Fly Nowhere got full reign of the redesign of the social media, the tone, the photography, the graphics, the stadium. Diego said all 4 kits did well. Then he said the jersey sold out in 4 hours originally. The social media tripled in numbers. And then we became, in his words, a little story in world football for a couple of months. Well, I'd say it's a bit longer than a couple of months now, as we talk about them 2 years on from this kind of era he's saying here.
Like Duncan Niederhauer was saying, like, we thought it was really, really cool, but we did have a lucky timing, because it just, all of this came together just as they also got promoted to Serie A. So he said sometimes you are more lucky than you are smart, but we did do a really good job. But like, getting to the top division in Italy also probably helped, and like we said, being in Venice. So as this football season, as it comes into view, they're going to be lining up against the likes of Milan, Roma, Juventus, Inter. Venezia on the world stage, aren't they?
They'll have all the eyes on them. But as the season started, details regarding on the shirts weren't really going to plan. As designer Matthew Chernikov explained, they had to battle with Serie A. They played most of the season without the traditional Venezia badge, because Serie A determined that having Venezia across the chest when they didn't have a sponsor counted as the one name for the club, the marketing name for the club. And the club claimed it was just the name of the city, but hey, Serie A didn't kind of look through that ploy. And behind the scenes, as much as we saw this amazing marketing campaign behind the scenes, it was a bit of hobbled together at the last minute to be able to get this ready for the main stage of Serie A.
We now know the club is going to look the part on the pitch, and now we sort of get to the other preparations that they make for this Serie A season. So their first Serie A season since 2002. So a lot of new faces are brought in, and one of which saw the club break their transfer record when signing American midfielder Gianluca Busio for $6.5 million or 5.7 million euros. But also seeing familiar faces like Ethan Ampadu come on loan from Chelsea and Matteo Caldara on loan from AC Milan. Just as we said, like, the new shirts wasn't going quite to plan for the beginning of the season. Neither was the stadium itself, the Stadio Pierluigi Penzo.
Sadly, the stadium simply didn't hit the required capacity for playing in the top tier. The Penzo at the time had a capacity of 7,400, well short of the minimum 16,100 set by the Italian Federation. And in fact, the Winged Lions had played under a permit kind of exemption in their promotion season, as the stadium failed to even satisfy Serie B standards in relation to lighting and access. But thankfully, as Mayor Brugano emphatically stated, the home of Venezia is Penzo. They will play here next season.
Work on the floodlights was needed, and attention needed for the changing rooms, the press area, and to bring this up to standard, with the project head Andrea Cardinaletti stating the work goes on every day, and if necessary we'll be ready to double shifts and even work 24 hours a day. So I'm just imagining, at this point, you've got all these construction workers working 24 hours a day. You've probably got all the designers locked in a dark room, changing all the details on the shirts. You got the
sporting director buying players, trying to figure out who's going to be playing left back for Serie A.
Meanwhile, like Ethan Ampadu's just walking through and thinking, like, what the f*** going on here? Like, it's absolutely like construction site.
Can I just get some Italian lessons, please? What's going on?
Despite the 24-hour days, there would be a delay in Serie A football returning to the Penzo. Venezia actually played away for the opening 3 games of the season, but for their first game back in the top flight, they travel to Napoli's Stadio San Paolo, now the Stadio Diego Armando Maradona. For their first game back in the big time.
Unfortunately for Venezia, despite Napoli going down to 10 men in a 25th minute red card for Victor Osimhen and Insigne missing a penalty, Venezia would unfortunately be defeated 2-0 on their debut game back in the Serie A.
Yeah, and then they'd make the short trip to Udinese and lose 3-0. It'd be third time lucky, as they'd finally get their first win back in Serie A, 2-1 away at Empoli. Fluctuating results would follow throughout this first half of the season, wins against Fiorentina and Bologna, grabbing a point against Juventus and Torino, but then losing to fellow relegation battlers Spezia and Salernitana. Without a doubt, the biggest result of the first half of the campaign was when Venezia got the better of Jose Mourinho's Roma at the Penzo.
A little crossover there from our FC Porto episode.
Roma travel to newly promoted Venezia for this Sunday fixture at the Stadio Pierluigi Penzo on the banks of the lagoon.
Venezia would take the lead as one of the new men in the door, Caldara, touched home a set piece in the 3rd minute with their first attack on goal.
There he is in the wall, the ball comes in! Venezia! They've scored in the 3rd minute of play from their first chance. The free kick proving deadly for Roma.
Tabby Abraham would smack the post in response, and then it would be a quick-fire double that would put Roma back in the lead 2-1 up. But a heroic fight back in the second half would see Mattia Aramu slot home a penalty. Then Nigerian David Okereke would be played in over the top. He ran through on goal, and as the one-on-one with Rui Patricio loomed, Okere produced a step over to send the goalkeeper one way and slotted the ball home the other side in fantastic fashion.
Long ball forward from Ampadu has found Okereke! Okereke! 3-2 Venezia! The Nigerian beating Rui Patricio.
Yeah, Venezia would be denied a 4th by some great Rui Patricio goalkeeping, but it would be enough to claim a massive 3 points. And as the club's battle for survival played out following this, they would add some more known, recognised faces in January, including Michael Coinstance and ex-Manchester United players Nani and Sergio Romero, which Nani playing in the Venezia kit this season, I think, is just a whole vibe in itself.
Despite these reinforcements, the second half of the season would be in fact woeful for Venezia, claiming only 2 wins and going on a 10-game losing streak. For example, this is one story from Christian, who thankfully would pass on a load of stories from the Lagoon, saying about how after a 4-1 loss, the players had to participate in what is known as a furore le palle. In English, it roughly translates to balls on the line. For example, recently you might have seen on social media after AC Milan lost Champions League semi-final and then they lost to Spezia, they were forced kind of to go over to the ultras and kind of talk to them, deal with it, listen to the fans and demand, give more for the club and this type of thing. The players in that example where Christian was there, it was, the Penzo only has about 4 bridges and the ultras just kind of blocked one of the bridges and the players were kind of unable to escape. He told one funny story about how screamed at one of the players that I don't give my kids food so I have enough money to pay for the ticket and come and support you. So it really was getting bad in this second half of the season for Venezia.
Add to this, the manager that had been the architect of the promotion, Paolo Zanetti, was relieved of his duties with 5 games left to spare. And caretaker Andrea Sonchin was tasked with the survival as they led 6 points from safety, but with a game in hand over 17th place Cagliari. And a little note to that, Paolo Zanetti would actually take the Empoli job in Serie A the following season and kept them comfortably in the division. So, you've some question to ask, maybe was it the right decision to let him go? Or who knows? We'll never know. But the last standout result would come as relegation beckoned with a do-or-die match at the Penzo against Bologna. If they lost, relegation was confirmed. Win and the club would stay afloat for one more match day.
Remarkably, Venezia raced into a 2-goal lead inside 20 minutes, but Bologna would fight back as Venezia collapsed. As we hit the 70th minute, Venezia are 3-2 down. Surely that's it. Surely that's Serie B coming over the horizon. But no, they'd be awarded a penalty to draw themselves level, which was converted, and in 90+3, up stepped Dennis Johnson, who whipped home a goal. To quote the commentator, was a goal that gives the whole city hope.
Plenty of bodies forward. It falls to Henri. Henri Skorupski denies Henri. Johnson scored an absolute wonderful goal. I don't believe what I'm seeing. Dennis Johnson, with his first goal for Venezia, has given an entire city hope.
But unfortunately, just as they think they might be escaping Serie B, here comes Roma's revenge. After beating them early in the season, Jose Mourinho's team would draw 1-1 with Venezia at the Stadio Olimpico in the second-to-last game of the season and in turn confirm relegation to Serie B.
So sadly, the managerial change wasn't enough to stop it, and the Serie A dream was over and it was back down to Serie B. But what a year it was. And like I said, Venezia were a club that I think even a lot of people especially wasn't familiar with. I'd at least say that until they sort of burst back on the scene. And I think on the whole, in terms of growth for the club, despite relegation, it was a successful year.
Ultimately, yeah. After the disappointing relegation from the top flight, several changes were made at the club, both on and off the field for this current season.
Ex-Italian international Christian Molinaro hung up his boots and accepted the role as technical director, and Davide Brendolin was promoted to sports director. And on the bench, Andrea Soncin would return to coach the youth team and made way for Ivan Javorcic, who had just made a great season with Südtirol, obtaining a historic promotion to Serie B.
There was also a lot of change amongst the playing staff, with many departing, along with some new additions, most notably the Finnish duo Jesse Joronen and the big beer-drinking viral sensation that is Joel Pohjanpalo. Other players of note joined the club in that season are 2018 World Cup star Denis Cheryshev and more randomly Brighton's Aaron Connolly.
And to keep this theme of change rolling, the club even had a new badge on their Kappa shirts as well. And Ted Philippakos, they spoke about how from the beginning the stylisation of the brand and the importance they'd given to the brand, it transcended whatever league we happened to be in, and we'd been taking this seriously since the third division, so why would we do anything differently? But rather than fly nowhere this time, they turned to Munich-based design house Bureau Borsche, and they list Balenciaga, Supreme and North Face as brands that they've worked with. What would they do for Venezia? And they actually came up with, it's almost a brutalist new club badge, this new image-focused website. And that's before we even get to the shirts. There's photo shoots, once again, with the imagery of models eating croissants and reading the paper in Venetian squares. And this led to fashion magazines covering the club with profiles on their new identity, and the news spread fast once again.
As the club's appeal continues to make waves, it led to a fan base based outside of Italy itself. Ted stating that in fact 96% of merchandise sales are outside of Italy. The biggest markets being the US, the UK, Western Europe, Japan and Korea. So really going worldwide here with these new designs.
Which is even more astonishing when you think how many other clubs could be, try and put it into context, could be relegated from, the top division of their country to the second division and be selling 90% of their merchandise out to Japan, Korea. The only other club off the top of my head I can think that could even possibly do that is someone like St. Pauli, maybe.
They have a equally unique cultural phenomenon that kind of goes beyond the division they're in, like Venezia here.
Despite the relegation, I think this one is also pretty mind-blowing. Venezia sold 4 times as many shirts this season as they did last in Serie A, which I would love to know the exact number because I'm sure it's many, many, many shirts. But amazing that they're outselling what they did in the top division anyway. So like you said, it transcends what division they're in.
Designer Ted would like to stress that it's not just about the online fans, however. He states, football to me is a public good. What other phenomenon in society that can contribute that powerfully to civic pride, social cohesion and community development? Few things, if any, can achieve stuff like football does. Kind of gelling that outside market with the new local fan base, getting them to gel together in a kind of perfect harmony would be I can imagine just gold dust for Venezia.
Despite all of these crazy sales figures and things, they actually started this current season very poorly and actually looked in danger of being relegated again, which this time would be to Serie C, to almost undoing a lot of the hard work they had coming up so fast. But things did start to look up after back-to-back wins, which saw Venezia rise from 19th to 13th, but this wasn't until around matchday 23-24, after only achieving 5 wins before that all of this season. And actually they would then go on to only lose 3 more games during this second half of the season, including a run of 6 wins in 8 games. And I'm sure everybody knows the man that had a huge impact on this turn in form is Joel Pohjanpalo, who scored 18 goals, but he's drank, I think, even more pints during this run. And the only thing that now seems to be bigger than Venezia's fashion status is the big Finnish striker's post-match beer drinking habits.
We'd like to think everyone listening has already seen this video many times, but the whole thing started in February. Joel was subbed off after a great performance, getting 2 assists. He left the pitch and thought, I think I deserve a little reward for my performance today. Walked over to the stadium bar and grabbed himself a cold beer. He even stopped to take a few selfies with the fans before heading back to the bench as the game in the background petered out in the final minutes. And this video just went probably as viral as the shirts did, as the humble Joel Pohjanpalo was enjoying a beer after a great performance for Venezia.
A few weeks later, Venezia faced Modena, and a loss would have put them in danger of relegation. And Pohjanpalo made sure that didn't happen and found the back of the net 4 times in a 5-0 win that secured his club's safety in Serie B and placed him at the top of the league as the joint highest goal scorer. And to celebrate, of course, he had another beer as soon as the final whistle blew, so this time he waits for the game to finish. He walks over to the small kiosk, shirtless, with the ball in hand, grabs himself a pint to the delight of the crowd, and they're all cheering him on like, what a guy. And yeah, I think that is my favourite video of the season, like combined with, you know, the shirt off, the ball. I think it's brilliant.
And it's fully deserved, as he's finished the full season as the second highest goal scorer in Serie B, which when you think that they were almost relegated at one point and then rose up the table, yeah, he's single-handedly pulling Venezia potentially back to Serie A, as we can say. On the final day, Venezia were perched, thankfully, in the playoff positions, but with Pisa, Regina, Palermo all just behind them on 1-2 point differentials. The final day was just chaos, as results elsewhere were constantly affecting what Venezia were doing as they played against Parma. Unfortunately, they fell to a 2-1 defeat, but thankfully, fellow promotion chasers Pisa lost to Spal, and then Regina scored in the 90th minute, that leaped them ahead of Venezia, but then Palermo fell back behind, and it was absolute chaos running into the last 90 minutes. The Venezia game ended, losing 2-1 unfortunately, but meanwhile, the Palermo game, where if Palermo could have managed to get a goal in the final minutes, would have seen them get into the playoff positions. But no, Brescia managed to keep them out. They drew 2-2, finished outside the playoffs, and Venezia scraped in the final playoff spot in miraculous potential relegation to now potential promotion in what was a very hectic and busy final day of the Serie B season.
It's a good point now for us to look to the future of the club.
Fortunately, we don't want to see Venezia rushing out of the beautiful Penzo anytime soon, but there is a lot of rumours and shreds of info online about the idea of a new potential stadium inland on the mainland. In March of 2022, Duncan confirmed this, stating that the Stadio Pierluigi Penzo is never going to be a 40,000-seater stadium, no matter how successful they are on the pitch. So there are plans to build a bigger sporting complex on the mainland. The mayor of Venice is the author of this plan, in fact, and it would include things like a basketball arena, a football stadium, and some other facilities. Duncan talks about the importance of a future site being multi-purpose, stating there is no future for a one-dimensional stadium anymore. For example, a football stadium only being used as a football stadium. He says you have to look at indoor arenas that are being used 200 plus times a year.
Yeah, so part of this plan is the creation of Venezia headquarters, which has this ethos of family across all parts of it. He wants the players, the staff, the youth academy, the women's team, everybody going to this sort of same home, this same complex every day and interacting with each other and getting this real sense of community. He says this is like a bigger part of the investment plan rather than sort of a new stadium. When you think about it, the Penzo is used 20 days a season or something, whereas the training ground is used, you go there every single day, you're there way more than you're at the stadium. So they want to put more money into improving the facilities, creating this state-of-the-art training centre. Realistically, this is, to get to that kind of level is, at least a dozen or so years from now, if everything goes well. But
they've stated how they've just refurbished the Penzo, so don't worry, ground hoppers listening. We will have time to get to the Stadio Pierluigi Penzo. It's not going away anytime soon, but it is in the plans that they would like to move to a bigger, more modern stadium. Paolo Poggi explains about the uniqueness of the Pierluigi Penzo, stating the walk to the stadium is a unique thing when you come to see a match here. There are plans to build a new stadium in the future. Maybe this will be possible, but at the moment, the stadium we have here is something that deserves to be seen.
Certainly does, and it's one on our lists. Moving back to look back on this future and to wrap it up, I think the future is certainly looking very, very bright, and Venezia, they've become this fashion brand in their own right. We'd love to see them make it back to Serie A, but that isn't crucial for this sort of period of growth they're on, and I think in reality, if the worst thing happened this season and they actually were to have been relegated to Serie C, I'm sure they'd have had still a viral shirt sensation next season or something like that. So I think in terms of off the pitch, it's very bright. On the pitch, it's looking very good. We're hoping with the playoffs, they seem to be secure financially with this joined up thinking at the top. They could even take inspiration from other clubs punching above their weight in Europe, for example, in the Bundesliga with Union Berlin.
Very close to home. They had a very similar climb in the fact that when they reached the second tier of the Bundesliga 2. That was their second time ever being there. They made this solid base in the Bundesliga 2, stayed there for over 10 seasons. And then this is where, as most people know now, Union Berlin are like fighting at the top of the Bundesliga. This is where they built a solid platform for them to then jump into the top tier. So, I mean, if Venezia, after, they had 3 bankruptcies in 10 years. They've had different owners, different managers. Even now, when we are complementing the structure and stuff around the club, it is still quite hectic. There's different people coming in, different players going out, different sporting directors, managers. I think one of the things that probably Venezia fans would like to see is just a kind of something that doesn't really happen in Italian football, and maybe can't happen, maybe it's just part of the culture, but just pure stability. The same owner for 15 years, a manager for 5 years, a new manager from like the academy for 5 years in like just Serie B. Just stay there, solidify, and then potentially, you get a good season, you get a good youngster through the academy, you maybe pick up a bargain from the lower divisions and he jumps you up into Serie A. I think that will be the future, as well as also when Duncan Niederauer was talking about how the money needs to be spared more up and down the league. I think those two things in combination, there's no reason why Venezia can't potentially jump up and punch way above their weight in the future.
Like we spoke about before, is just cashing in on their luck and their luck of being in this beautiful historic city, and you've got to think, if they do manage to solidify themselves as a Serie A team and pushing on in the future to try and get Europe, it shouldn't be hard for them to attract top tier players to the club on one level, because obviously the things they've done to market themselves, but the other thing is literally you could go play for Venezia and live in Venice. Like, I'm sure if we chatted to some of the players that were only there for half a season, I don't know, someone like Nani or Ethan Ampadu or someone, I'm pretty sure the fact that they were going to get to live in the Venice area had a big sway on them moving there, and I'm sure that will be a huge asset in the future.
Simply imagine it, Mark, that Champions League anthem ringing out as some more beautifully designed Kappa shirts are walking out at the Santiago Bernabeu or the Nou Camp or something like that. Just imagine how wonderful that would be, the beauty that would be.
I think the thing that excites me the most is, yes, them getting into European football, but then seeing hordes of drunken English people on the boats trying to get to the island, and you just know, like we've seen the videos of like Venezia's celebrations when they've got promoted or whatever, and it's this incredible thing, like stunning, beautiful people on the boats looking classy, all this, and you just know there's going to be like Knowlesy from West Ham like chucking someone overboard into the canal. I don't know. I dread to think what else will go on, but
it might not go with the beautiful, elegant, cultural vibe that Venezia have cultivated here, having some Londoner struggling to get out of the boat as he tries to get into the away end at the Penzo as he's downing his 7th pint in the past hour. It might take a little bit of the sheen of Venezia off, but hey, we would love to see it.
This beautiful historic city, and we've spoken about the inspiration and the little stars on the shit, and just like some English guy with a flare up his ass, like in one of these like boats going to the island. Just like a wonderful culture clash. That is what I can't wait to see that, and I want to be there.
So yeah, we cannot wait to see, hopefully, whether if not Venezia are in Serie A. Imagine if they are, and what a miracle promotion. Or if it's another beer sipping second tier season. We just can't wait to see what the shirts they have next, wherever they take them, whether it be gold, white, black. Obviously, we want to make sure it's Arancioneroverde, but the away kits and stuff, we cannot wait to see what they have lined up next season.
Just before we sort of round this episode out completely, it's the time to give you our cryptic link to our next team where we'll be going on our next adventure.
So the link to the next team is, in fact, one player joined Venezia on loan this current season before his deal was cut short. He then moved to another club in a rather different setting. Where could that possibly be? And a little name check, we have mentioned his name during this podcast. So if you want to scoot back and try guess who it is and where they were heading to, you'll find soon where we'll be heading to next.
I think that's all from us here. Wraps up our time in Venice. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. Sorry it's took a while to get the second episode, and thank you people who have reminded us and asked us for this second episode to come. We do appreciate it. And in the meantime, please drop us a rating on Apple Podcasts, share with any of your friends that you think would be interested. Message us on Instagram, Twitter if you want some stickers to spread the Journeymen word when you're at stadiums. In the meantime, check our social pages to keep up to date of when the next episode's coming, and I think that's about it from us here.
Keep an eye out, we'll be dropping another shirt giveaway to celebrate this release of this episode. And that's about it. We've been the Journeymen Podcast. We're finished here down in Lagoon with Venezia FC. We'll see you all soon for episode 8. And apart from that, there's nothing much else to say. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.